I want to talk about my total screen time as a software engineer. My total screen time for the past week was 2 hours and 44 minutes per day on average. And if you round that up to 3 hours per day, that's getting close to a whole day per week. 24 hours in 1 week spent on my phone. I know it's a few hours less, but if you round up, I mean, we'll just call it practically a day. I mean, to think about spending an entire day every week just on your phone, on top of working on a computer screen for 8 hours a day, that's a lot of screen time. So if we take 2 hours, we'll just say 3 hours. 3 hours plus 8 hours, that's 11 hours that I'm essentially on a screen. And that starts to get to you over time. And it's not something that we talk about a lot, as we enter this job of software development. But I think it's something that really needs to be discussed because I think it's important that we think about it. And I think it's an important factor as to, you know, do we even want to get in this job? Because it really starts to make you feel like you're not in reality in a sense because you're looking at something two dimensional. You're looking at something that is always giving you some kind of immediate feedback, and you're looking at something that you can control for the most part. You're on a screen and you're not out in reality. And so sometimes that can make me feel like I'm not engaged in reality, and sometimes it can make me feel a little distant from real things that are happening in my life. And sometimes I've noticed that when I look at screens um, for a while, I have to look outside at a far distance away just to kind of refocus my eyes. And they say that it's healthy to actually look away from the screen every 20 or so minutes and focus on something very far away from you to help you kind of reorient your eyes a little bit. I also have found it helpful to either with my finger or with an object to kind of move it in on my eyes and force my eyes to come in together and focus on an object moving towards me. I found that both of those things kind of help me. I don't know. It makes my eyes like kind of adjust, for lack of better words. I don't know the correct terminology here. It just makes my eyes feel better. How about that? And I noticed that when I started software engineering um, about 6 years ago, I really started to notice my eyes kind of being strained and having a harder time focusing when reading a lot of the small text. And I have really good eyesight, and I sit pretty far away from my monitor, but I just noticed that my eyes were being strained from looking at screens for that long. And that's largely continued throughout all these years. And a way that I've kind of combat this a little bit is to use blue light filters on my screens and to do what I said about staring somewhere far distance away. So that's why it's important actually that I sit by a window because I need to look outside, not only for my eyes, but for just kind of honestly my own sanity because I need to feel like I'm still engaged in reality, if you want to call it that. And sometimes I'll go work outside if it's not too cold out. Sometimes I'll go sit outside by some trees or plants, something to feel like I'm being reoriented back into reality. And I've read this before about people who work in a digital job is that they begin to feel disconnected from their surroundings in the real life, and they begin to feel honestly a little isolated. And I've noticed this with myself too. So it's important, I think, to still, make yourself feel like you're engaged in reality as you're working in the job. Because let's face it, it's easy to get lost sometimes in a problem. It's easy to, when you're in the middle of writing, some method or you're writing an endpoint on an API that you're making, it's easy to kind of be consumed by that a little bit and to lose sight of other things that are happening. And so it's important that if you find yourself routinely, you know, being lost in a problem for hours on end, it's important to break that up regardless of what phase you're at on it, because if you routinely kind of lose yourself for 2 3 hours at a time, you're gonna that's gonna take an impact on you, or it's gonna take a toll on you a little bit. So it's important that you separate that out. And honestly, this is not something that I'm good at. I'm trying to get better at, which is in part why I'm making this, to try to tell myself this. It's important that you separate out your day in a way that makes sense, in a way that makes you feel re-engaged with reality. So for me, I've been trying to get better at um, riding my bike places that I want to go work, because I live by a bike trail and I can ride my bike into town. So I'll go ride my bike usually in the afternoon. That gets me moving around, it gets me outside, and it clears my head so that I can go back and work on something that I was working on. Something else that I've tried is to is this it's to take a few minutes before a meeting just to kind of either get coffee or just walk around, or do something a little like, well, honestly, just go for like a 5 minute walk before meetings to kind of help you get ready to then sit down for an hour and talk about something or show code. Because I noticed that if I'm sitting down for an hour or an hour and a half, working on something, and not working on like a problem or a story, and then I immediately go into like a meeting or two, I'm not in the same headspace that I would be had I gone outside and walked around. If I do that, I'm thinking much clearer, I'm more engaged with reality, so it seems. But if I don't take that 5 minutes to go get coffee or maybe tea or water, or just walk around, I don't feel like I'm 100% there. I always feel like I'm like 70 or 80% there. Um, and that can kind of come out in the form of like maybe not taking notes on a meeting, which I try to do, or not asking a question because you lack the motivation to, or honestly, you might just feel more tired because you haven't moved around at all. And that's one of the dangers of this job too, is that we do work on it. This is a very sedentary job, right? I have a stand-up desk that I try to raise and lower um, when I remember to, but it's easy to just be stationary for the whole day. And you can do this for a while, but over time, you're going to notice like you're going to feel a little bit more tired every day, even though you haven't really moved around much. You're not going to be thinking clear. You're going to get into this, mental fog, and it's hard to get out of that. So it's important to break up your day, and I'm trying to develop this for myself. And I think I waited too long to do this, to be honest with you, because I know for a fact I was not good at this early on in my career. I would sit at my computer or stand for a lot of hours and not feel like I had maybe like the freedom to go walk around for like 10 minutes, um, because I felt like I had to always be at my desk, like typing or something. Um, you can do that, but I think it takes its toll on you after a while. So this job is has a lot of benefits, and it's definitely a career that you can grow very fast in, very rapidly. But there comes a cost, and I think that unless you actively fight against the kind of uh, separation from reality, the isolation of the job, I think that it can really begin to take its toll on you, which you don't want to which you don't want to let happen, and especially after our last conversation, or some conversation we had about burnout. That's a very real thing, and not re-engaging into reality is a pathway to burnout. And it's not it's not that it's irreversible, and it's not that it's not a fixable problem. It's just that in my experience, it takes a lot longer to get out of burnout than it does to burn out. it seems like it seems like it's a slow process at first when you're like feeling the beginning stages of burnout, but then it comes on like all of a sudden, and it's pretty quick, and it feels like it takes a double or almost triple the amount of time to get out of that and get back to a normal state. And a normal state I would characterize as feeling, not just motivated in your job, but feeling like you're re-engaged fully with life and the real world. Because apart from software engineering, apart from like career advancement or salary or benefits, apart from all that stuff, you still have to live. And I think there's a great temptation in this job to completely ignore living and solely chase career advancement as fast as you can. Because the unique thing about this career, and I think is why it's very enticing for a lot of people, is that you can grow very rapidly. You can progress and have a lot of success very early on in your career. And that's very appealing to people because if you throw yourself 100% into it, you can go up the ranks very quickly, and you can get to the top of your field in less than 10 years, and you can see 100-200% salary increases if you do that. And so obviously for those factors, it's very it's very enticing to do that. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but I think that if you do choose to do that, you need to keep a personal gauge on yourself as to where your head's at, what you're feeling and how you're doing. Because I think without that, and I know I've experienced this, is that you'll begin to feel burnout and it's hard to get out of that. And I feel like currently myself, I feel like I am either like I'm like right in the middle, I would say, to be honest with you, of like a burnout cycle of like where I feel like I threw myself into trying to advance as fast as I could, but I never really allowed myself to take all the vacation days I had accrued or take the necessary sick days or really just, maybe I showed up, but I was only operating at 75%. And that's okay because we're not machines, we're people. And I think admitting that you're not 100% there on a given day and just saying, hey, having an off day, maybe I'll sit this meeting out just so I can focus on some of my stuff to get back on track. That's okay to do that. I think it's very human to do that. And so just keeping a gauge as to where you're at is vital alongside of trying to chase advancement and getting ahead. And I think both are possible, but I think that the default is to not keep a gauge on yourself. The default, I think, is just to throw yourself in 100% and see how fast you'll succeed and progress because the opportunities are there, and it's hard to not do that. It really is. It's hard to not always be chasing the next thing. That's all I got for today. I'll see you in the next one.